Schneider's Bakery episodes are like Newton's third law. For every episode, there is an equal and opposite episode. Meaning, every time there's an episode that brings up a concept and does it poorly, there's another episode somewhere out there in the Schneiderverse that does the same concept way better.
Hey guys, Pie Guy Rules here, and welcome back to the Bizarro Bakery, where we take a look at the opposite of episodes that are featured on the bottom of the bakery. So it's the second episode, which means we are covering the opposite of My Poober. My Poober was the first Sam and Cat episode that I covered, and it was an episode about a little girl being attached to her stuffed animal that Sam and Cat are recruited to take away from her. When the girl doesn't comply and just give them the bear, they try a few underhanded tactics before Cat decides to tell her a secret, that is that they keep their money in this pineapple, and then the girl proceeds to use the money in the pineapple as a way to get back at Sam and Cat for trying to take this poober away from her. Some of the problems I have with the episode is that the characters are unlikable, the ending is stupid and vague and not very satisfying, the little girl actress doesn't do that good a job, and the show tries to convince us that this girl is an evil villain worth bad things happening to, but in the end she just kind of comes off as a little whiny brat. So I figured the opposite of this would be an episode that has a little girl that antagonizes the main characters and gets punished for it in some way. And fittingly enough, there's a Drake and Josh episode that has exactly that. And it works out, because that was the first time I talked about Sam and Cat on the bakery shows, and this will be the first time I really get to talk about Drake and Josh. The episode I'm talking about is called Little Diva. If hashtag My Poober is a pineapple upside down cake, then Little Diva is, just a regular pineapple cake, I guess. The premiere, the movie theater Josh works at, is having a premiere in which they host this little girl actress that comes to the premiere, the movie theater, not the premiere itself, although she's also at the premiere. The main focus of the episode is how Josh and later Drake have to placate this little girl who ends up being a monster diva and just a horrible, horrible person, so that Josh won't lose his job and Drake will be able to make it to the after party. This is all further complicated when the girl accidentally gets hurt and has to take a medication that knocks her out, which means Drake and Josh have to basically prop her up on their arms and drag her around and pretend that she's not passed out during her Q&A session before the movie premiere. So one of my biggest problems with My Poober is the little girl herself. So let's talk about that. In this episode, Little Diva, this Ashley Blake girl acts like a total monster. She demands so many things of Josh. She makes him remove all the green gummy bears, she yells at him and treats him like scum and threatens him with her bodyguard. She acts like a monster, and the actress really pulls it off. I mean the actual actress, not the actress, the character. She really just does a good job of being a very, very convincing brat. Instead of coming off as whiny, she comes off as just evil. And this really helps sell the episode when a bunch of bad things happen to her later on. And the difference between these characters is that in Drake and Josh, the girl goes beyond that of a normal bratty little girl. She has a big bodyguard and doesn't care when Josh gets flattened by a refrigerator. She has no remorse and is just horrible. She feels like a villain. But in Sam and Cat, the girl just feels like a normal bratty little girl, like a kid that's just slightly misbehaving. In Little Diva, they're trying to make her an over-the-top, horrible child actor starlet that's super selfish and mean. And I think they really achieved that. Having that big bodyguard behind her really helps push that. In Sam and Cat, it looks like they're trying to go for a little girl who is manipulative and evil and mean, except she just comes off as a pathetic little kid that does one thing wrong. Not that she's some sort of monster that needs to get revenge upon. And speaking of that, let's talk about that next. Another one of my biggest problems with My Poober is how the main characters act in relation to this little girl. Now, let's look at how Drake and Josh act in Little Diva. Well, basically, they put up with this little girl and do everything she says. They don't attack her or try to assault her or even pretend like they're going to. They completely put up with it. And as a result, there's a lot of physical comedy because of the bad things that happen to them while trying to follow this crazy little girl's orders, which I find to be a lot funnier and a lot better off than what happens in My Poober, where the main characters try and assault this little girl and basically stoop down to her little pathetic level. Drake and Josh are a lot more respectable than Sam and Cat because they're a lot nicer to this little girl and understand that this is a little girl. You really can't do much to get back at her. And the bad stuff that happens to the girl in the episode is not Drake and Josh's fault for the most part. She gets knocked out by a bucket thanks to Megan. It's not Drake or Josh that do it, and even at that, it's an accident. And then she gets sedated by kind of accident. The doctor, that apparently is their neighbor that Drake and Josh call in, is a complete nut job who just prescribes her medicine that puts her out for who knows how long. Literally, he doesn't know how long she's gonna be out for. The only thing that Drake and Josh actually do to her is dragging her around her limp body and shoving her in garbage cans. Which sounds horrible, but you have to remember this is Drake and Josh. It comes off as very slapsticky and very goofy and very funny because of how over the top and silly it is. It's not Sam with a baseball bat about to run to the back to smack this girl. It's just Drake and Josh dragging this girl around. And the actress pulls it off so well. Never for a second do you look and say, alright, well this girl is smiling. In My Pooper, the girl smiles when Sam assaults her. In this, no, she's just able to play dead really convincingly. So my last really big problem with My Pooper was the ending. How Sam, Cat, Goomer, and Dice just leave this little girl in the cemetery in the middle of the night while they're supposed to be babysitting her, alone with this really creepy guy who begins to sing ukulele songs to her. There's actually an addendum that I need to make to that statement in that video, in that I say that Sam and Cat get their money back, so there's no harm and they shouldn't be trying to even get back at the girl at all. However, it's actually kind of ambiguous as to if Sam and Cat do get their money back. They get their money back, but it's all shot full of bullet holes, so it's ambiguous as to whether or not the money is still usable. Now, I'm personally not sure whether the Federal Reserve would honor money that has been shot with a bunch of bullet holes. However, Sam and Cat take the money with them, and there is actually no single statement in the episode on whether or not their money has been completely ruined. So even if there is something online that says, yes, for sure, this money is ruined, or yes, for sure, money like this would still be accepted, the episode itself should actually say that, because if I'm confused, I can definitely tell you that the target audience would be confused as to whether this money is actually legal money at that point. But in the video, I say it as if it's a fact that they get their money back, when in reality, well, the episode really isn't very clear on that fact. Anyway, the ending in Little Diva is actually quite similar to the ending in My Poober, in that Drake and Josh leave this little girl inside this garbage can until the end of the after party, at which point they pawn her off on Citrus, her bodyguard, who then proceeds to dump her back in the garbage can. So, why is this a better ending than in My Poober? Well, a few things. First of all, Drake and Josh aren't really the ones responsible for this little girl. They were just told to get her through this party. Her bodyguard seems to be the one that has responsibility over her, or heck, maybe that was supposed to be her brother who she fired earlier in the episode. So having her bodyguard abandon her in Drake and Josh is a lot better than Sam, Cat, and the other main characters ditching this little girl when they are the ones that are supposed to be in charge of her. Also, especially considering all of the things that happened to Drake and Josh because of this little girl in that episode versus, what, the girl in My Pooper doing one thing to Sam and Cat and not giving up the stuffed animal that she loves. It's also a lot more of a punchy ending because it has the bodyguard dump her in the garbage can when you're not expecting it, versus Sam and Cat's ending where they all just kind of run away and then sing a song. It just kind of seems very anticlimactic and random. To be honest with you, the endings aren't totally different, and I'm not in love with Drake and Josh's ending, but I have to say that because the episode was funny, especially towards the end, it just kind of sells me on a somewhat darkish comedy ending versus Sam and Cat. So that's all I have to say comparing Little Diva to My Poober, but I do still have a few things left to say about the episode on its own, because I do think it is a rather clever episode of Drake and Josh. And in general, I think Drake and Josh is so much better than Sam and Cat and pretty much everything that followed it. Just for instance, the comedy on Drake and Josh is just so much better. And I guess it is Drake and Josh themselves and the chemistry that they had working with each other, as well as the fact that a lot of these jokes were a lot more fresh and new and different back when Drake and Josh were doing them, versus nowadays when Jasper's pulling the same type of shtick. Speaking of the bucket boy, that actually provides me with a nice segue here. The reason that the little girl gets knocked out in the episode is because Megan and her were planning a prank on Drake and Josh where they knock a bucket from a door onto one of their heads. Now, what I like about this is that the girl gets hurt because of the bucket. However, she doesn't get put into a concussion like you think she would. In any other TV show, that would be enough to put her into a concussion and then she'd be out for the rest of the episode. But no, instead it just hurts her, and it's the sleep medication that actually puts her out, which is a lot more realistic. Now, it's not super realistic that this doctor would come and just prescribe a bunch of random medicine to this girl, but still, it's more realistic than having someone pass out. Because if someone actually passes out because they got hit in the head, they have to be hit really hard in the head, and usually that comes with a lot of nasty side effects and lingering real problems, unlike how you see in a lot of TV shows. It's a subtle touch, but I like how it's a little bit of a subversion there. And I have to say that the part where Drake and Josh are dragging this little girl around Weekend at Bernie's style is great. It is just so wonderfully cheesy and over the top and unrealistic. It's just so wonderful. All of the little gags they put in there, oh, she's just praying, and oh, yes, well, she lost her voice, and how they leave her on the podium. All the little bits in there are really clever. The episode is decently funny up until that point, but as soon as that climax starts, oh, it just gets so very funny. Also, there's a joke in this episode about Drake and Josh seeing some guy on the list and saying, oh yeah, he's a famous celebrity, I can't wait to meet him, and then realizing they have no clue who he is, which I find to be really ironic, considering how many times these Schneider's Bakery shows happen to mention celebrities and people that I have no clue who they are. Oh, and actually, back to comparing to Sam and Cat for a second, you remember how way back in the pilot episode of The Bottom of the Bakery, I talk about parody. I talk about the Silence of the Lambs parody they did on Sam and Cat and how it's stupid. Well, this episode is very much a parody of Weekend at Bernie's, at least the climax is. But the thing is, you don't actually need to see Weekend at Bernie's or even know that it's a reference, because, well, it's just a silly physical thing they do. It's certainly based on the movie, but you don't need to know that to enjoy it. It's just some really fun, silly slapstick. There is but one thing that I do not like about this episode. This episode features not Helen. And by that I mean, they have Helen, Josh's manager at the premiere, being played by someone other than Yvette Nicole Brown. Why is this? I have no idea, but it is really strange to see. This is literally the only time it happens in the entire series. And to be fair, this is only the second time the premiere has, well, been shown on Drake and Josh, so maybe they weren't entirely sure that the premiere was going to be a recurring place, so they didn't book Yvette Nicole Brown for several appearances. They only booked her for the one, and then they brought the premiere back, but they needed Helen, and she wasn't available, or some sort of mix-up. So I can kind of understand how this sort of thing happens, but still, it's very strange to see. So there you go. I could probably gush about Drake and Josh for a very long time, as I do think it was a very clever show, and I do think it is very sad that every show that's come after it has tried to leech off of it in one way or another. But I think I've said everything I need to hear. I'm sure I'll be talking about this series a lot more on Bizarro Bakery, as I think it has quite a few good episodes, and seems to be the source for a lot of content that ends up getting ripped off later on down the bakery line. I mean, I'll definitely be talking about this show again when it comes to talking about the Bizarro version of I Pair Store. Bye Guy Rules, out.